So what are you waiting for? Get your T levels checked today by local, experienced, and trusted men's health experts. They've helped thousands of men since 2011. They're so confident they can help you, they even guarantee it. Call Revive today and schedule your free testosterone test, free exam, and free consultation. Call Revive Men's Health at 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit revivemenshealth.com.
Introducing Yes, Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. We're bringing all of Utah's favorite HVAC, plumbing, and electrical brands under one roof. Call the pros at Yes and save up to $1,000 on select new energy-efficient HVAC systems. Plus, you get a free whole home air purification system to help reduce harmful airborne contaminants in your home. The same great people providing the same great service that Utah has counted on for more than 45 years. Visit theyesmancan.com to schedule your appointment.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
Welcome to AutoZone. What are you working on today?
I think my battery's dead.
With free battery testing and charging, AutoZone is here to help.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
What if I need a new one?
We have the right batteries right here at America's #1 battery destination.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
And what if I don't know how to connect it?
No problem. We have a how-to for you at AutoZone.com.
Get in zone, AutoZone.
Restrictions apply.
If you want a heating and air company that uses third-party verification of their work, that is one of the highest rated on both Google and Yelp, then call At Your Service Pros at 801-YOUR-PRO.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
We do have a band of dark clouds and weather moving from Sandy to the east near Cottonwood Heights area. It's already left I-15 soaked and soggy and a little bit of slowing, but speeds are improving. Right now, no accidents on the Valley freeways, but if you do encounter rain, remember lights and wipers on. Today only, Zero Res is running their famous $25 sale. You don't have to clean today, but you do have to get on the schedule. Call or visit ZeroRes.com to get your spot today. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
We'll see highs in the mid-80s for the next couple of days, and that chance of thunderstorms turned into reality down in the southern end of the Salt Lake Valley, but we'll see temperatures rise into the 90s by the weekend. And right now, 76 degrees and sunny in downtown Salt Lake at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis are holding dueling campaign events in New Hampshire today. Both of these candidates are polling well ahead of the pack in the national polls for the GOP nomination for president. But as always, we want to look underneath those numbers and look at a possible think again kind of question. Could being the second choice actually create the best path for finishing first? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
We're going to get to that second choice option and how it actually might be clearing a very good path of possibility to be coming first. But let's start with the dueling press conferences. Former President Donald Trump spoke at a women's luncheon in New Hampshire and, of course, began by criticizing the indictments against him.
Every time the radical left Democrats, Marxists, communists, and fascists indict me, I consider it a badge, a great, great, beautiful badge of honor and courage. Because I'm being indicted for you.
Classic former President Donald Trump, starting with the grievance message there in New Hampshire. He went on to attack the dueling battle of the day with Ron DeSantis and Ron DeSantis' pandemic policies in Florida.
Ron was actually strongly closed. Remember, he closed the beaches, closed the highways. He didn't want anybody on those highways. Remember, those highways were closed. We want everybody locked in. He would make very threatening speeches, you know. I think he's a tough guy. And but then all of a sudden he's campaigning, I didn't close. And the media, the fake news goes with him. Well, you know, he didn't do that. And he loved Fauci. You know, he loved Fauci at the beginning.
All right, so that's the former president. That was his message for the day in a critical state of New Hampshire. dueling event, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis attacked former President Donald Trump for not fulfilling his campaign promise to drain the swamp.
And I remember these rallies in 2016. It was exciting. Drain the swamp. I also remember lock her up, right? And then 2 weeks after the election, don't forget about it. Forget I ever said that. No. We didn't drain it. It's worse today than it's ever been, by far. And that's a sad testament to the state affairs of our country. But even if you're successful at draining it, the next guy can just refill it. So I want to break the swamp. That's really what we need to do.
So that's Governor Ron DeSantis. And again, kind of going back and forth between former president and the current governor of Florida. And it creates an interesting juxtaposition. They're clearly at the front of the pack when it comes to the national polls. But as always on this show, we want to go to just underneath that. So while those two are dueling each other and on a very similar message, kind of same song, different chorus, so to speak, between the former president and the governor of Florida. But there's some interesting things underneath the numbers that people should be watching. So really interesting. We talk about this idea of being the second choice. And is being the second choice right now the best path to finishing first when it actually matters in the end? Someone who has made a big jump in that space is Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina. He's getting a lot of attention from Republican primary voters right now in New Hampshire, Iowa, South Carolina, his home state. And the interesting jump, he hasn't vaulted up high in the top line polls, but here's the interesting thing underneath the headline. With his positive message, with a forward-facing look and a vision of what he wants the country to look like, rather than grievance policy, rather than battling who he's against, he's laying out a case for what he's for, and it is starting to resonate. So in a recent NBC News poll, if you ask the voters, who is your second choice for the Republican nomination, that person who's vaulting is Tim Scott. He's gained incredible momentum. He jumped 9 points just over the last month in being everyone's second choice. Now, that's always an interesting thing when you're looking at politics. So we see that here in the state of Utah, often in the convention, where you'll have someone who, well, they're not my first choice, but you know what? If they go out, they're my second choice. And often that person who really has the ability to garner support broadly as the second choice ends up having a really interesting leverage point to become the first choice in the end. And so this is one of those numbers that we're going to continue to watch as the other top line numbers. I don't think those are going to move a whole lot. And remember, the polling is a snapshot. And the most important thing right now is what's happening on the ground in these states. But you look for little trends in the polling to see if a message is resonating or if a particular candidate is gaining momentum. And I think Tim Scott's message is starting to resonate. People are starting to take a little closer look. And they're sensing, hey, you know what? He may not be my first choice, but man, I really like him. I think he could be my second choice. So last Friday at the Faith and Freedom Coalition, Senator Tim Scott spoke and called back to his altercation he actually had back and forth with former President Barack Obama.
President Obama decided to jump in as well. He says, I'm too optimistic. I have been accused of being too optimistic, too positive, too proud to be an American. For those accounts, I am guilty. Guilty as charged. I love America. I love our country.
That's Senator Tim Scott last Friday. Also in that same speech last Friday, it gives you a sense, and he is authentic and genuine as it comes. I've had the opportunity to be around Senator Scott. I've watched him work in the halls of Congress and on the Senate side as well. And he is who he is. He is authentic. He is proud of the country. He is very connected to the American dream story because he's lived it and he's seen his family live that. In his speech on Friday, Senator Scott went on to explain why he's so optimistic about the country.
I love our country because I had a miserable beginning. I started off on the wrong foot. My parents got divorced when I was 7 years old. We moved into my grandparents' house. My grandfather was born in 1921 in a very segregated South Carolina. But he believed back then what too many doubt right now. He believed in having stubborn faith. Faith in God, faith in yourself, and faith in what America could be. My family chose patriotism, not pity. We chose that this is the land of opportunity, not the land of oppression.
So Senator Scott's clearly getting some attention. Again, the former President Barack Obama felt like he needed to weigh in. Of course, the women of The View had weighed in also against the senator, saying he just doesn't understand what it means to be black in America. I think that's a tough point to argue with someone whose grandfather worked in the cotton fields, raised by a single mother, lived a good chunk of his early years with his grandparents, and has risen all the way to the United States Senate and is running for president of the country. So he has a positive, optimistic message. So here's some of the other things under the numbers that make you want to just say, okay, let's keep an eye on everybody's second choice. So really interesting. Senator Scott has one of the highest positive ratings, negative positives, in terms of perception. And obviously with the former president, he has a lot of very high negatives. Ron DeSantis is kind of in the middle. But clearly, Senator Scott has a lot of upside. He has a net positive rating, and that's really interesting because it's tough to keep those in politics these days. Most people are a little upside down in their numbers in terms of how people view them. The other thing that's really interesting to me as it relates to Senator Scott is he also has a lot of upside in that 34% of Republican voters still don't know enough about him. So he's still a little bit of an unknown quantity. So that means he's got a pretty high ceiling if he has another 34% who just don't know him, but might still like him if they get a chance to hear that message and get a little look into that vision of what he's trying to do. So all of those things are really interesting. Under the numbers, again, the big headline numbers are going to be this is a Ron DeSantis, former President Trump battle at the top of the polls right now. But just remember, sometimes the best path to being first is to be everybody's second choice while the battle's raging on. So we'll continue to watch all of that as we watch all of the presidential politics as we march our way towards 2024.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Summer in Utah means road trips and road work. This week, get information on the construction that will affect how you get around, roadwork plans around the state, repairs to potholes, and a future project in Spanish Fork. Summer construction, this week on KSL News Radio.
Register for breaking news updates by texting the word news to the Cypress Credit Union KSL text line at 57500.
Are you or someone you take care of as their caregiver living with Alzheimer's disease? This study just might be for you. Consider participating in a Atheris clinical trial exploring a novel repair and regenerative approach to Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City is looking for people with mild to moderate dementia, 55 to 85 years old. A consistent caregiver or support person is necessary for the conduct of this study. This study is a late-stage clinical study of an investigational drug for the treatment of mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research has over 30 years' experience with clinical trials. They conduct their business with professionalism, efficiency, and integrity. Contact Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City today. Again, call Pantheon Clinical Research today at 385-281-0550. That's 385-281-0550. Or go to pantheonclinical.com. That's pantheonclinical.com.
Wesley is a truck driver.
I drive a truck, and I love what I do.
A truck driver with IRS troubles.
They told me I owed them $43,000.
It got really bad.
Quite a few letters in the mail. They were talking about wage garnishment, coming after my house, my car. Yeah, they don't play around. I seriously thought that I was going to lose everything.
One sleepless night, Wesley finally made a call to Optima Tax Relief at 2 a.m.
Kind of figured I'd get a machine, but I didn't. I actually got to talk to an actual person in the middle of the night.
He found just what he was looking for.
Oh, they were great people. You need a team of people that know what they're doing. Optima Tax, they know what they're doing.
Optima Tax Relief came through with flying colors.
I saved an incredible amount of money. Happy don't even come close. I was absolutely overjoyed.
Take Wesley's advice.
If you're in any kind of trouble with the IRS, call Optima Tax Relief. Don't trust anybody else.
Call Optima for a free consultation. Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Want to get out of just about anything and look like an earth-saving hero? Just use the environment excuse. High school reunion? Ooh, sorry, can't. Planetary obligations. Unfortunate bridesmaid's dress. Unfortunately, you promised the climate you'd buy more vintage. Chauffeuring teens? Yeah, the earth really needs them to hoof it. That's right, the environment is always the best excuse. So go ahead, ask your bae to dim all the lights because carbon emissions. Tell your dad-botted dad to eat more plants, for the planet, obviously. Kindly tell the kids to stop asking for a new phone. I mean, e-waste, right? Find your out and opt in to cutting carbon. Just visit theenvironmentexcuse.org. A public service announcement brought to you by WildAid.
With our roots in northern Utah, Holy Cross Hospital has a legacy of caring to help every person be whole and healthy. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
At Holy Cross Hospital, we're honored to carry the legacy of our namesake and equally honored to care for northern Utah's vibrant communities. Find us at 5 Holy Cross Hospital locations and more than 45 clinics along the Wasatch Front. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
Any Hour Services can help unclog any drain in your house, whether you have a backup, a clog, or a slow drain you want fixed. Call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
Join KSL in the Movie Show this Friday from 9 to noon at the Salt Lake NPS store at 1600 Empire Road in Salt Lake City, npsstore.com.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the group that sued the Utah legislature over congressional redistricting is delighted with today's Supreme Court ruling in a case from North Carolina. Second, the state of Utah getting more than $300 million to expand high-speed internet access in rural parts of the state. And third, 1,000 flights out of the Northeast have been canceled today, most of them on one airline, United. Right now, 76 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
Well, as you know, Arthur Brooks is a good friend of the show, an author, academic. He recently had Dr. Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General. This is his second time around as Surgeon General, and they had Surgeon General on his podcast to have a conversation about loneliness in America and the connection it has to social media use. So the question then is, what do we need to know about how we approach social media, especially when it comes to our young people? And how can we make our communities and country feel a little less lonely and a little more connected is the real big question. So we're going to dive into this. Again, this was a podcast with Arthur Brooks and Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. So to begin to address the problem of loneliness in America, Arthur and Dr. Murthy talked about social media use and the issues that it can cause, particularly among young people. Dr. Murthy explains that social media addiction among youth is real. I think it's also real among adults. Social media platforms were actually designed to maximize time spent on those apps.
A third of adolescent girls are saying they feel addicted to social media, and half of adolescents are saying that if they had to get off of it, it would be hard to do so. And by the way, if we all think about our own experience, I suspect many of us have felt the same way, that we wanted to reduce usage at some point in time, but found it hard to do so. And so I think the one thing it's important to understand is that this isn't happening by accident. Many of these platforms have been designed to maximize how much time we spend on them, because that's often tied to the revenue model. But as a parent, as a doctor, as Surgeon General, what I care about is maximizing the health and well-being of our kids. That misalignment, though, is a real problem.
Dr. Murthy lays out ways that social media can impact self-esteem among our young people as the platforms bombard them with a massive volume of constant social comparisons.
Social media can also impact a child's self-esteem in profound ways, not only through the exposure to harassment and bullying, but through the constant self-comparison that takes place on social media. We mentioned earlier that adolescents are particularly sensitive and affected by the social comparison. What's different here is the volume of comparison that's taking place on social media compared to real life. And all of that might seem benign, but when it's at that volume, it really takes a toll on young people.
I think it's really interesting that the Surgeon General has issued a statement and really a warning. And it was interesting in this podcast. This is the Art of Happiness podcast with Arthur Brooks. And they talked about the fact that a lot of the things that we're seeing with social media are not dissimilar from what took place back in the 60s when people started to really recognize the health impact of smoking and the kinds of advertisements that were being laid out there, particularly to get young people to begin smoking. And Arthur and Dr. Murthy went back and forth in terms of what that looks like and how there are so many similarities in terms of the smoking and what the Surgeon General did back in the 60s when the Surgeon General said, look, this is going to cause cancer and kill you. Now we have a Surgeon General today saying we've got to be very careful about social media, and we have this epidemic of loneliness in the country. Dr. Murthy touched with Arthur Brooks on the Happiness podcast regarding the topic of what he calls displacement issue. And this is an important one. We don't talk about this enough, I think, as it relates to social media. And it is the time on these platforms and that it takes us away from really valuable, meaningful, connected activities.
But the last bucket to consider in terms of how social media causes harms is what I think of as the displacement model. So it displaces activities in our life that are also health promoting. When you start to get up to using social media for many hours a day, as so many kids do, we displace critically our sleep, in-person time with friends, and physical activity. And we know that these three are really vital to our health and well-being. A third of adolescents are saying that they're staying up till midnight or later on weeknights using their screens, and much of that is actually social media use.
So as you look at that again, with young people in particular, if they're not getting their exercise, if they're not getting sleep, if they're not getting that in-person time with friends or real conversations, that's all going to have a negative impact on overall health, let alone mental health. And I think the same is true for all of us. And how often do we, say, oh, I'm just going to check one thing, and then you lose 20 minutes at a time. And you start looking at the displacement that does and what it prevents you from doing, whether it's getting a task done or being on time to a meeting, getting to sleep at a decent hour. All of those things add up. Arthur Brooks, in this same podcast, as he was talking with the Surgeon General, brought up an important point during the conversation about how social media use can be fine. It has its place. But like any addictive substance, if it replaces real connection in our lives, that's when it becomes the problem.
The social media, when it's a complement to in-person human relationships, can be great. But when it's a substitute, then you got a problem. And this is sort of the case with any behavior or substance of addiction. And, addiction specialists will say if it complements your relationship, it might not be a problem. If it substitutes for your relationships, you always have a problem.
So the question is always, does it complement your in-person, real life, real conversations, or is it a replacement? So complement versus replacement, I think, is a big test and a good question for all of us to ask, whether it's with our own social media use or that of our young people, the young people around us. And so getting to the solution portion of the program, again, this was a podcast, the Art of Happiness podcast with Arthur Brooks and the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Murthy. So as they went to the solutions portion, Dr. Murthy had to say some interesting things about ways that we can improve the situation as a society beyond just implementing rules and putting more laws in place in terms of social media. It is about connecting with each other. That's the best way we're all going to deal with loneliness, isolation, comparison, depression, and all of those things.
First, we've got to recognize that simply reaching out to one another and reconnecting is one of the most powerful things we can do to address loneliness. It might seem like too small an action against too large a problem, but this is actually how we foster connection. It's through the small conversations where we check on family members, we check on friends, and we help them know that there's no shame in struggling with loneliness, because many of us do. So that's one of the most important things families can do. The second thing that we can all do as families is we can support efforts in our community that bring people together to get to know one another, whether those are our faith organizations, whether those are community organizations. We can get involved in those organizations. We can start to support and build efforts that bring community members together.
So as we look at those solutions, I thought one of the things the Surgeon General said that was so impactful for me was he said, sometimes we think these actions that we can take are too small to deal with too big of a problem. If you listen to the program yesterday, we talked with Russell Moore about the idea that, look, to solve a big, huge problem, you don't necessarily have to have a big, huge action. Sometimes a very small, seemingly insignificant action might be the thing to turn the tide, change the direction, and begin to solve the problem. It's easy to get discouraged. It's easy to get down when you think you have to come up with this big, massive, instant solution. Politicians often sell that Washington can do that for us. But the reality is when it comes to loneliness, when it comes to depression, all of those things, it's very small and insignificant moments that actually matter. Now, Arthur Brooks closed out the Art of Happiness conversation and podcast with the Surgeon General with a very succinct approach to combating loneliness in our lives, in our families, and in our communities.
It's a fair summary of your views and mine, that happiness comes from loving and being loved. If you're going to resist something, resist things that make that harder, and adopt into your life the institutions that make it easier. Make sure that you practice it on purpose every single day by loving others, even when they're hard to love, and the reward will be abundant. We'll be taking care of the technological problems we've been talking about, but more importantly, the affairs of the heart that really make us all fully alive.
Again, that's Arthur Brooks, and it's the Art of Happiness podcast, and just a deep dive look. It's about an hour conversation with the Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, and really went at everything from social media to loneliness in America, and the solutions to so many of those things are just right in front of us. They're very simple, they're very subtle, and sometimes in a very noisy, very chatter-filled world that we live in, we miss it. And just learning to step back just a little. You don't have to go cold turkey. You don't have to step away from society as a whole. You don't have to go off into the mountains forever. But you can do some small things today. And one of the most important things is to just make a connection, to reach out to a neighbor, to a friend, to a loved one. Reach out. And then we all have the opportunity and responsibility to do the same, because that's how we see each other deeply, and that's how we're actually deeply seen. All right, we'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news. More Inside Sources coming up next. Stick around.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. A second brake check area is coming to Highway 89 in Logan Canyon after yet another semi lost its brakes heading toward Garden City earlier this month.
Continue to look at it, and we won't ever just throw our hands up and say, well, we've done all we can do. We have made quite an investment up there, and we're continuing to do that with this second brake check area.
UDOT spokesperson Mitch Shaw says they hope to have it up and running by this fall. This will be located further downhill from the runaway ramp they installed a few years ago. That ramp has yet to be used. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled in favor of a man from Colorado who was convicted in 2016 and imprisoned for 4.5 years for stalking an up-and-coming female singer-songwriter. Justice Elena Kagan wrote the court's opinion, supported by a 7-2 vote. She said that speech alone, even if it's threatening, is not enough to send someone to prison. ABC News contributor Asha Rangape explains.
In creating this subjective standard mental state that prosecutors have to prove, it does make it a little bit harder for prosecutors to go after threatening speech. At the same time, she says there's a hierarchy of mental states. And she does say that in this kind of case, prosecutors need only prove the lowest mental state of recklessness, that they consciously disregarded the effect of their actions. They don't have to show that it was purposeful or knowing.
And your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up 243 points on the day. The NASDAQ proportionately even more, 239 points above the starting point today. And our KSL weather, we've got sunshine in parts of the valley and dark clouds in the others. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:32.
Early mornings can be hard enough, just getting yourself going.
We try to make it a little easier with news and weather from comfortable, trusted anchors and reporters.
Join us on Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9
on KSL News Radio.
Hi, we're Comparion Insurance Agency. Right now you're thinking, Comparion, never heard of them. We know.
We also know that you have no idea that Comparing Insurance agents are local and provide expert advice. So to help it stick, we're going to say local agent 4 times in the next 15 seconds. Ready? Go. Our local agents know you and your community. Our local agents offer insurance from top carriers. Our local agents have minty fresh breath.
Find us at comparinginsurance.com. Comparing Insurance Agency. Local agents, expert advice.
And there's number 4.
You don't plan for a computer virus. You don't plan to lose files. You don't plan to knock your laptop off the counter. And you don't plan for your PC to crash or your screen to freeze. But Staples has a plan. A plan for unlimited virus protection. A plan for help when you need it 24/7. Staples Total Support Plans are your tech plans for the unplanned, starting as low as $199.99. And although you didn't plan for this, right now at Staples you can also get $250 off select computers. N729 in-store only. See associate for details.
You've heard me say it before, Replenish Landscape Garden Products really has everything you need to make your lawn and garden work and look beautiful. Greg's here with me again. So many different products out there. I think people will find it convenient because they can come in, look at the specific product, get it loaded quickly, and get back home to get the job started.
That's what our focus is on bulk and bag materials. Obviously, we're known for the compost itself, which has gained a great reputation, but our soil blends are excellent. We have the bulk box garden blend. We have 4 different colors of wood mulch, 5 or 6 different kinds of shredded bark, and just a variety of things, including sand and gravel.
A lot of these playground chips and things are found in kids' playgrounds all over the valley. Find out why landscapers valley-wide use Replenish Landscape Garden Products. See them at 4660 South, 200 West in Murray. Go to their website at replenishcompost.com or give Greg and Mike a call at 801-262-5142. Replenish. It's good stuff.
Don't miss America's Freedom Festival in Utah County, a celebration with a mission to teach the honor and patriotism of our great nation. Take in Utah's largest July 4th Grand Parade, Freedom Days in downtown Provo, Balloon Fest, and Colonial Fest in Orem, followed by the state's biggest fireworks show and concert, Alta Bank Stadium of Fire, featuring Journey. For information, visit freedomfestival.org. freedomfestival.org.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
We do have a little bit of heavy and slow traffic southbound I-15 in Davis County going from Centerville to Bountiful. And a crash called out about 3700 West near 80th South. Take a break from financial worries. Meet with a Mountain America debt consolidation expert for a chance to win a vacation package. Details at macu.com/debt rescue. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather. Well, we had a sudden storm in the southeastern part of the Salt Lake Valley, and those clouds have been moving north. Right now, partly cloudy in downtown Salt Lake. We'll see highs in the mid-80s for the next couple of days with just a slight chance of thunderstorms. Temperatures rising into the 90s by the weekend. 79 degrees right now at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, as most of you know, I spent about the first 25 years of my career focused on leadership, working with organizations around the world as an executive coach, as a mentor, as someone who facilitated a host of retreats for executives trying to get their act together and figure out what leadership was really all about. So there's nothing I love more than seeing someone who gets it, and not just gets it, but actually goes out and does it. And so I have really been looking forward to this conversation. Monty Moran, of course, is one of America's most admired business leaders. He's the former co-CEO of Chipotle Mexican Grill. And the most important thing to me in all of that was that he built a culture. I always say culture eats strategy for breakfast, and at Chipotle, they built exactly that. And we're really thrilled to have Monty joining us on the program today and looking at leadership, I think, in a way that actually is authentic and real and the most powerful way to build a culture. Monty has a new book coming out called No One is a Stranger, Finding Love, Connection, and a Brilliant Life. And Monty Moran, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much, Boyd. Great to be here.
So let's start with your work at Chipotle, because to me that really was a process of going from a regional burrito chain to a Fortune 500 rock star. Tell us about the culture component of that, what you tried to build, how'd you go about that?
Yeah. Well, what was neat about Chipotle was, it had a great concept to start with. But when I went in there, my goal was to build a kind of culture where people, felt super, super empowered and were working not because someone told them to work and not because they were getting a paycheck, but because they really believed in what they were doing. And in order to do that, of course, I had to give them a vision, and give them an idea of what would happen if they, what their lives could look like if they built terrific cultures within their restaurants, if they elevated each other, not just themselves, if they found ways of providing a wonderful customer experience and really building a team where each and every one of them cared a lot about the others. Because I think the foundational principle that I shared when I very first started at Chipotle and also at my law firm was that each of us in this lifetime will be rewarded based on our effectiveness in making the people around us better. And, that foundational principle, Boyd, and frankly, I try to live my whole life that way. And I think that everyone would be well served to live their life that way, because anyone in this life that I admire, and probably anyone you admire if you check it out, and anyone that's most admired, I think, generally in history, has been someone who really devoted themselves to the well-being or benefit of other people, try to help others.
Yeah.
And so if you can create a culture within an organization, and even a large company, and I would say especially a large company, where each and every person there knows that the way they will get ahead in the company as well as getting ahead in life is by making the people around them better, it's really, really powerful, because that's basically what leaders do, isn't it? A good leader makes others better, elevates other people, ignites a spark in them so that they are doing something that they want to do, not just something they're told to do.
Yeah, no question. And I want to dig into several components of just the title of your new book. Had me running down a whole bunch of rabbit holes in terms of, okay, where's he going here? Where's he going there? But I want to start with just straight up on the title. No one is a stranger. Why that?
Yeah, I tell you what, it took me a long time to find a name for this book. And then when I was reading my own book before, the manuscript, and that sentence was in there. No one is a stranger. I'm like, that really encompasses it. So I decided to name it that. But my point is this, love isn't really something that each of us has to give other people. Love is something that exists out there, right? Love to me is the same thing as God, right? Or the same thing as truth. These things to me are synonymous. So love's out there, and the best thing we can do is allow love to flow through us. And if we allow love to flow through us, and someone else who we're with, even if they're a stranger, is allowing love to flow through them, then even two quote-unquote strangers walking down the street can have a really wonderful connection, even in a moment, even in 10 or 20 seconds. There can be a wonderful connection. Heck, it could even be 1 second if it's just a loving glance to someone else that gives you a loving glance and walks by on a trail or on a road. And so really, this idea of strangers and beware of strangers always bothered me, even since I was a little kid, because I was like, what does it mean to be a stranger? Are they strange because I don't know them? Absolutely absurd, Yeah. And so I thought that was a good title. It reminded me of how much I thought that was just an idiotic concept that people are strangers. Someone's not a stranger. They're just someone that you don't know. But the reality is you kind of do know them, even if you don't, because each of us in this whole planet, all of us have so much in common, right? Like each of us wants to be seen. Each of us wants to be valued, understood, and loved. That's what all of us want. That's what the President of the United States wants, and that's what a person doing their first day as a janitor in a high school wants. We all want, to be seen, valued, understood, and loved. And a lot of us go about doing that, I think, in ways that are very ineffective.
Yeah.
And I think some of us go about doing that in ways that are more effective. And my goal by writing this book is to help people go about that in ways that are more effective, and using some of the things that I've learned throughout my life and my career as a CEO of a law firm and Chipotle and so forth.
So important. And that we've been talking a lot about the connection component today. We were going through Arthur Brooks, a good friend of the show, on his Art of Happiness podcast, had the Surgeon General on, and they were talking about just the disconnection that's happening. And one of the things that you have in the book that I love, and I think it's such an important part, is this whole idea of listening and asking questions. And that really, the holiest thing you can give to another person is your presence, your full attention. And the next level is to be curious and asking the right kinds of questions. Walk us through your view of that.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. That's a wonderful question. Well, the reality is that giving someone your presence is huge because your presence is the way you allow love to flow through you to another person. But when you are curious, curiosity is in and of itself a loving act. I mean, just by being curious, what are we doing? We're asking someone a question because we want to understand them better, want to get to know them. And by asking that question, we're curious about something that they have that we don't, or information or knowledge they have that we don't. And by asking them a question, we're promoting them to the position of being our teacher for a moment, and thereby subordinating ourselves to the position of student. And that's really, really important because, and especially when someone in a quote unquote leadership position is curious and asks questions of someone who is, say, an entry-level employee, what that high-level leader is showing is that, hey, I actually want to learn from you. I want to learn from the entry-level people. And so at Chipotle, I did over 25,000 interviews one-on-one with people in our restaurants. I talked to every single person in every single restaurant, every single visit, sitting down one-on-one. And that sitting down, Boyd, is really important because it gives some solemnity or it sort of honors the person. I mean, people sit down when they do the most important things of their lives, whether it be a great dinner or, dignitaries sit down to talk about business, whatever. And so, but when you're curious, you promote that person. So each time I sat down with those people and asked them a bunch of questions about them, and it wasn't just questions about business. In fact, I was talking about just asking them questions about who they are, what makes them tick, what they love about life, what's their family like, what do they, and just get to know them. And by getting to know them, I had a great connection. And by having a great connection, you could feel that love flow. And the whole culture of Chipotle became, as one of my good friends says, like a cult, but in a good way.
The positive view of that.
Like a cult, but in a good way. Because everyone just loved each other, and everyone was really, really bought in to this notion that by making the people around them better, that would be what would elevate them in terms of their position at Chipotle, but also in terms of their spiritual life and the way they felt about themselves and their sense of fulfillment as a human being. And that's really why, after writing, Love is Free, Guac is Extra, about leadership, really talk about how I built Chipotle in the law firm and built that culture. No One is a Stranger is more of a book for everybody. Yeah. It's more of a book to say, like, hey, if you can understand these concepts, you can learn to have a much more extraordinary life, because the only way, Boyd, to have an extraordinary life, and you know this really well from all your work, is to have extraordinary relationships. It's the only way.
Yeah.
If you don't have great relationships, your life's going to suck. It's not going to be much fun.
That's exactly right. So true. So true. I want to get to one last component, and that is this whole idea of allowing your brilliance to come out, living that brilliant life. And you attack this in the book in so many different ways, but I think one of the important ways is having that courageous vulnerability to be authentic that way, and then to really break beyond that in terms of that humility, and then looking at what is it that actually creates that brilliance and allows that to flow.
Yeah, well, great questions. I love this. I could talk to you forever. But, I think that in terms of brilliance, each and every person in this world is brilliant. I think most of them don't know it. Most of them don't experience it. Most of them don't let it flow, but they've got brilliance. And so many people in this world are trying to be like someone else. And it's a pity, because the uniqueness of each and every individual person is so special and so extraordinary. But the only way to find your inner brilliance is to, learn to connect with, sort of the universe, or sort of connect with yourself and the world by being yourself, by being open-hearted, by being vulnerable, by letting all of your weaknesses show. In fact, I say in the book, I guess I said in Love is Free, that we should advertise our weaknesses. Let people know that we're weak, because what do you do when someone's weak, Boyd? What's automatic?
Yep.
You want to help them.
Go help, yeah.
I mean, right? I mean, if you see someone in the street going, ow, 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 rolling in pain, you're going to go, hey, what can I do? Are you okay? Can I help you? Can I call an ambulance? It's human nature. We want to help someone. But who do we least want to help? We least want to help people who look like they don't want or need help. Hey, I've got this. Hey, I don't need you, So vulnerability is the opposite of that. I don't need you. Vulnerability is like, hey, I'm here. Here's who I am. Here I am in all my nakedness and all my, if not physically naked, here's my spirit wide open. This is who I am, for better or for worse, And when you really open yourself up in that way and really make yourself vulnerable and really let people see, let's say, your soft underbelly, so to speak, spiritually, what they do is they come towards you, and these incredible connections form. And those connections are the foundation of any great relationship, whether it be business, whether it be your husband or wife or partner, whether it be a boyfriend, girlfriend, or whether it be a good friend, or even someone on the street who just makes you feel great just by walking by and giving you that special smile that shows you that they give a shit about you. Excuse me, they give it on about you.
Absolutely. The book is No One is a Stranger, Finding Love, Connection, and a Brilliant Life. And Monty, I'd keep you on here for the next 4 hours. We just barely scratched the surface. Everyone go out, and this is one of those books you have to pick up and read and experience. And again, it's not just for leaders. This is for everybody. I do wish a few folks in Washington, D.C. would read this in particular, because I think it would change the dynamics and how we see each other, the dignity, especially the dignity of those that you disagree with. And Monty, you've obviously built an extraordinary career and organization. More importantly, you've impacted lives doing it one-on-one. No one's a stranger. Monty, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Boyd. I'm really honored. Thanks so much.
All right. Fantastic insight there from Monty Moran, former co-CEO of Chipotle, and great new book, No One is a Stranger, Finding Love, Connection, and a Brilliant Life. That's worth a read for your summer list there if you're looking for something. We'll be right back.
Summer celebrations are almost here.
You can light off your own fireworks until 11 p.m. on the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, midnight on the 4th.
And the fireworks stands are open.
Even if it's green, it can still burn.